Just want to take a moment to talk about some of the experience I've had with transitioning, dealing with financial pressure, dealing with a change in your identity, how you work through periods of high pressure, high stress, where there's large scale changes happening to your life. So the easiest way to sort of start back at the very sort of beginning of where I started. So I joined the army at a young age and spent 22 years in total in the Defence Force, and the vast majority of that I spent within a specialised unit with a really high operational demand. So when you look at when I actually transitioned out, I probably ticked a number of boxes around what you would consider high risk. So I've seen a lot of operational deployment. I was transitioning out of the Defence Force, a lot of data to show the mental health issues around that. But when it came time for me to transition, it was sort of my attitude that I went to it with provided me with the expectation of how that was going to go, and that expectation drove most of my motivation and the outcomes. Okay, and so the outcomes I had were a result of my attitude and the expectation that I came in with. And I just want to talk about how some of the tactics I use and the way I went about it could be useful for anyone that's going under a similar situation. So during my career, I was exposed to a lot of combat and a lot of the sort of things that go along with working within those environments. But for me, every time I went away, I looked at it as an opportunity. So it would be challenges where I could grow and I could develop, and then I could use those skills later on, rather than a period where I'd be under a lot of stress and I had to worry about the negative impacts of that. So I looked at it as though I was priming myself to come home in a better position, rather than priming myself to be in a worse off state when I got home. So I went through my career. I deployed on and off pretty regularly and spent most of my time away. And then I got to a point where I sort of started looking at some stage I need to be able to leave the Defence Force and I need something else to go to. And I had a few other interests. So I looked at studying, and I thought if I studied, that would provide me with an opportunity to transition out of Defence Force into something that I enjoyed at a later date. So the Defence Force was something I was really passionate about. So for me, getting into the unit I got into was something that I'd always wanted to do. So it was almost as though I'd achieved my dream job. So I spent a long time in there, really enjoyed what I was doing. But there comes a time when you're not going to be able to do that any longer. So I went away and I did my study. I did a bachelor's in science, and then from there that turned into a master's of sports science. And then I started looking at research because I had some really important questions I wanted to ask. At the same time, my wife had her own business, and things were really good for us. We were pretty comfortable. Everything was going well. We were looking at starting a young family, and we decided that it would be a really good opportunity for us to build our own house, somewhere where we could settle down. So we found a really good neighbourhood, designed our house, and pretty much started building what we thought was going to be our dream house where we'd be able to raise our kids. Not long after, an opportunity for me came up to go into professional sport, and I thought this would be a great opportunity to go and have a look to see whether this is where I wanted to go, or whether I'd return to what I was doing and continue the life that we'd start to make for ourselves. So to try and minimise the financial impact that we were going to go through in changing jobs, I took my long service leave on half pay. So that allowed us to have an equivalent sort of financial position as what we'd had, because I had to take a pay cut going into sport. So we obviously knew that that was going to be a limited time, and we prepared for what would happen once we lost that wage, and we had enough savings to carry us through to be in a comfortable position. So as that period approached, our construction started going longer than what we thought it would. So we're in a position where we're paying rent and we're paying a mortgage on a construction for our dream house. So at the same time, I had to change my master's subject group. As I moved from defence, I couldn't use that subject group any longer, so I had to find a new one, which caused delays in my data collection. So we've got to the point where I've lost my long service. So my long service pay was cut overnight, and we knew that was coming. But it's something that still, it hits you, and it created a little bit of concern as to, okay, well, we're not too sure how much longer our construction is going to go for. And so now we've sort of taken a financial hit. And during the time we were away, my wife's business started to suffer, and she was sort of looking at whether she wanted to continue down that path or whether she wanted to take a new occupation and move into something else. So she decided that it was probably time for her to do something new, so she applied for a new role. So once my long service ran out, we pretty much took a 50% pay reduction overnight. So we knew that was coming and we planned for it. and we had a few things in place, but it's still something that when it hits, the reality sets in straight away that now life is changing for you financially. So the problem didn't stop there. So not long after that, my wife got accepted into her new occupation, and we decided that if she got in, then I would resign from my role in professional sport, and then I would take on the primary carer role looking after our young family. So she went into a trainee position, which was lower than the wage I was on. So again, we took another financial hit. So now we're down to about 30% of our income. So over a period of sort of 3 to 4 months, we've had our income dropped by about 70%. I've had to move into a primary carer, which is something that I've never done before. So I'm trying to understand how I go from what I was doing to being good at what I need to do now. So I've had to repurpose myself. And for me, it wasn't that hard to break away from my old identity. I'd sort of seen it as something I did, not who I was. So I didn't have a huge identity in my previous role, even though it was something that, for me, it was probably, I thoroughly enjoyed doing. It was not who I was, it was just something that I did. So now I've got a completely new role, something else to look after. So I finished my data collection, and we're in a position where we've got heavily reduced income. So we're trying to work out how we can survive paying the rent and the construction loan, and I'm trying to work out where I can find time to do my master's thesis. So I'm still got quite a heavy workload, and things are starting to, and some of the pressure is starting to compound for us. So we sort of looked at it and we thought, well, this is by our own choosing. The situation we're in is not because circumstances that we couldn't see coming. We chose to do this. We took a risk, and now that risk is starting to sort of manifest a little bit on us. So we're just trying to buy time now until construction's done, and then we can sell our house. So returning and living in that house is no longer viable. We have to sell it. We're not in a position where we can hang on to that as an asset. And the hardest period during this time we've come to a Christmas period where we've had to sort of try and work out just how much money we had available to buy presents for our kids. And that's probably one of the hardest things, was looking at what we could get the kids and then having to sacrifice what they wanted for what we were able to do. So we decided to lean in. So we thought the best way to attack this is take it head on. Once we understand and own the problems, then we can own the solution, and we can work out what's the best way through this to minimise its long-term impact. And so when we leaned in, it also gave us the power to choose the behaviours that we wanted. So we decided that we weren't going to involve ourselves, so we weren't going to delve into any negative behaviours. So we weren't going to try and distract ourselves from the problem through binge watching TV or hanging out on social media all the time, or I wasn't going to start drinking to try and avoid having to confront my problem. So I know these other negative behaviours that actually just have a higher negative, or just compound the negative impacts that's going on. So through looking after myself, I was able to be in a position where I could rationally look at the problem and solve it. So for us, it was then cutting all our non-essentials. So any sort of subscription stuff we had was gone. Any eating out was finished. Any holidays were over. There was nothing we could do that required any expendable money. So even things that were almost a necessity, we had to find a way to cut back on those. So then we're putting cars for sale. We're looking at ways that we can extend what cash we have, or utilise what's available to us to try and extend this period, because we needed time at this stage, and we didn't really know how long this was going to last. We leaned into our networks a little bit to try and get a little bit of support. I looked at what was available, and then kind of had a plan if things got too bad, then where I would go to make sure that I was able to sustain my health and well-being, and to continue to solve this problem rationally and continue to meet it head on. So we just looked at solving one problem at a time, and hoped that our hole didn't get too big. And we got to the point where we'd pretty much exhausted all of our funds, and now we're starting to look at, okay, well, what's the next step? Okay, can we get out of our rental? Can we get out of our rental agreement? Okay, what happens if we can't pay our rent? Okay, where do we go from here? Okay, what happens if we can't pay our mortgage? Can we sell our house half finished or near finished? What happens if we end up in a caravan in someone's backyard? And for us, we looked at it and we thought, well, at the end of the day, we're still going to be together. We're still going to find a way to get food. Okay, it might not be comfortable. It might not be over very quick. We'd adjust. We'd adapt to the situation as we were required to. For our kids, it would probably be a bit of fun, a bit of opportunity, they're always going to see the fun in what we were going to do. But we thought, you know what, the worst thing that can happen is we're just uncomfortable, but we can get through this. So from here, this is where things started to pick up. So we'd confronted our problem enough. We'd managed to buy enough time to get through to a point where my wife now finished her training, so instantly we get a pay increase because now she goes up to a full-time wage. So for me, I'd even contemplated not finishing my thesis, so what would happen if I didn't finish that. But again, I thought it's something that I've started, so I need to finish this. So I thought I'll just work as hard as I can, as long as I can, and submit the best thesis I can get with what time I've got available. So for my Masters, the beauty of turning everything off is that there was no distractions from doing my Masters thesis. So I was able to stay up at night and work on my thesis for a fair few hours, making sure that I still got reasonable sleep. I was still enjoying for me, training was still a big deal, so I was still out training, and I'd already previously entered into a 24-hour obstacle course race, so I wanted to fulfill that commitment. So I ended up doing that on pretty much no money. So I turned up and I was probably the only racer there that was completely unsupported, had no accommodation, pretty much just had a beach tent with a bit of food with it for 24 hours, and that's how I did it. So based off the hard work I did for my thesis, I was awarded a scholarship for a PhD. So again, we've got another financial boost. We're able to sell our house, and now we're in a position where our income's meeting our outgoings, and we've got money in the bank. So like we're not going to use that money, but it's sitting there at a later date for when we're completely back on track. So for me, my experience has actually helped me. So I don't see deployments or war as a negative thing. For me, it was a positive. So it gave me the skills to grow, to understand how I worked under adversity, to understand if I was starting to get into negative behaviours and how I turned that around into positive behaviours. So I knew when self-talk was becoming negative and how to stop that and start making it positive. So it was never looking and worrying about the problem. It was understanding the problem, analysing it, looking at what options were available, and then working out the best path forward. So I had to completely repurpose myself and find a new identity. But it was, for me, I had a great challenge, so it wasn't a problem to do it. And it was just about solving the problems that were in front of me. So by leaning in and thinking about we need to come out of this as better people rather than just we need to do what we can to survive this, we were able to solve our problems, we were able to find solutions, we were able to maintain the strength, avoid any negative behaviours, and we came out better people. So now there's pretty much not too many problems that are going to turn up where we're going to worry too much. So when we come across a problem, we just look at the solution now. And it's given us the ability to almost overcome any problem. So it's in times of high stress, it's easy to look at your problems and worry about the threats and be consumed by fear, but it's not going to help you. And then the worst thing you can do is distract yourself or look for distracting behaviours by watching more TV, drinking more, looking at social media more. It spins you faster. So you need to solve your problem. You need to keep yourself healthy. You need to be able to sleep. You need to work. Make sure that you're functioning properly to solve your problems. And then it's just triage your problems. So you're solving the worst problem first, and then the second, and then the third, and then the next one. And if you keep solving enough problems, eventually you buy enough time, and then you find yourself in a better position and everything's turned around and you're back on track. Okay, because humans have the capacity to solve almost any problem. So we have the capacity to adapt to almost any environment. Okay, it doesn't matter how bad it gets, you'll adapt to that, you'll become familiar with that, you'll work out how to survive, how to get through that, okay, with the intention of your expectation needs to be that you come out a better person, and that expectation is going to drive your motivation, okay, and that's going to drive your outcome. So you're always going to get what you expect. If you want to learn more, or you're interested in understanding a little bit more about the tools and some of the strategies that I've used, please stay tuned. I'll release more videos, more information as much as I can to try and get it out there to help as many people as I can. Okay, so hopefully that's helped. You'll be able to relate that to your circumstances. But just remember, if you can stay positive, keep that good expectation, then really good things can come out of this.